So listen, I will be frank. When I went into No Time to Die, I had not expected to love the soundtrack as much as I ended up doing. That was one of the aspects of the movie I was kind of skeptical about, because I am a classical Bond fan. So for me, the people who should be providing the music to a James Bond film are either John Barry, which is obviously difficult now he's passed on, or David Arnold, who is just phenomenal. I think David Arnold was almost like crafted in a lab to compose soundtracks for James Bond movies. His work has been phenomenal, and I know one of the disappointments about Skyfall and one of the disappointments about Spectre was the fact that the directors brought in other people to compose the soundtracks, and it's kind of like, up to this point, that I just felt like if a James Bond movie was a big roast beef dinner, then a David Arnold soundtrack was like the Yorkshire puddings. It's like, sure, you can eat it without, but why would you? Yorkshire puddings is kind of the best part, especially when you dip them in the gravy. Oh. So David Arnold, it seemed like such a natural choice to compose the music for these movies, and it was so disappointing when he didn't. And it was disappointing when Dan Roma was announced as the composer for No Time to Die, although it wasn't unprecedented. I know Cary Fukunaga had worked with Dan Roma on Beasts of No Nation, and Skyfall and Spectre, I think the directors had worked with the composers. Back when Danny Boyle was going to direct No Time to Die, maybe that would have been a way to get David Arnold back in there, because I know that Danny Boyle had worked with David Arnold before. But I can see, after watching the movie, why they didn't go with David Arnold. I think David Arnold is just fantastic at what he does, and he gets the music of Bond films like perfectly, like it's running through his blood. I remember first becoming aware of David Arnold back when I was at university. I was a huge James Bond fan then, because I used to buy the VHS cassettes that would come every month, and I'd watch whatever movie it was like 17 times. Every morning I'd wake up and I would crank the Goldfinger theme. Goldfinger! And it annoyed all the people in the dorms next to me. But while I was at university in the mid-90s, David Arnold released something called Shaken and Stirred, which was his version of certain Bond themes. And I remember that captured my imagination. It really did, especially the themes that he reworked to movies that I especially loved, like On Majesty's Secret Service. I think Propellerheads did that. And it captured my imagination. I think it captured a lot of people's imagination, and that's why he was chosen as the composer for Tomorrow Never Dies. And if you listen to Tomorrow Never Dies as a Bond soundtrack, I think it's technically perfect. The only thing that's wrong with the soundtrack to that movie is the fact that the David Arnold track, Surrender, sung by K.D. Lang, was booted in preference for, was it Shania Twain? Shania Twain, is that right? Yeah, maybe. Sorry, I'm having flashbacks to the 90s. But apart from that, if you listen to it, it's just technically perfect. I would say it's like John Barry on steroids, because David Arnold gets every single beat of that soundtrack right, but he doesn't mess around. John Barry, you know, he laid the foundation for what a Bond theme is, but he would tend to go off on experimental routes, like On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's kind of painfully late 60s with some of the notes in it, and then he tried to go a bit disco in the 80s, and that's great, and I respect that. But it's like when David Arnold does a James Bond soundtrack, he is just like purist. He is, yeah, if John Barry is like a good bottle of wine, David Arnold is the brandy distilled from that wine. It's just perfect. I digress. Watching No Time to Die, though, I can begin to understand why they picked Hans Zimmer as the composer, because Hans Zimmer himself is a very, very talented composer, and he's also prolific. If you look at the films he has done the music for, it's ridiculous. It's like you can just knock him out. And I have on my playlist, I love listening to movie soundtracks, and I have on my playlist certain pieces of music, like from Inception, there's that track Time, is Flight from Man of Steel. Like, they're really inspiring, driving pieces of music. Hans Zimmer, to a lot of people, his music is kind of similar all the way through. It's kind of like every single movie kind of sounds the same, except that's not actually true. I think he is so prolific because he is able to, hit the beats of a soundtrack. Like, he can kind of cookie cutter it to a certain extent, just like when you're writing a romance novel, you are kind of using the same formula again and again. But he has definitely been shown to be a very, very talented and adaptable composer. One of my favourite soundtracks is to the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies. And you see there, they must have like dragged a piano from an old London pub with half the keys broken and stuff, and just like ding, 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 ding. It was brilliant because it just captured that madcap steampunk kind of experience that you were meant to have with Sherlock Holmes as like a true to life adaptation of everything that was beautiful and inspiring about it. So yeah, Hans Zimmer has versatility, but also he is able to factory stuff. And I think the reason that they had to bring him in was because Dan Romer, the composer, quit because of creative differences. And I think one of the reasons that those creative differences might have existed were the fact that Cary Fukunaga wanted specifically to use pieces of music from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And if you're a composer and you want to score an entire movie, it's kind of like, why do I have to include pieces of orchestral music from a movie that was done 50 years ago? So I can understand why a composer might have had a hesitation with that. And I also wonder, whether David Arnold would have had a hesitation with that if he had been brought in instead of Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer, though, as I said, he can factory produce soundtracks, or he can produce the most beautiful, adaptable, unique soundtracks. He is a craftsman. And I think the fact that, he works very closely with directors and is like, what do you want? And I think that's why some of his soundtracks are so kind of similar, because the director probably said, oh, I watched Man of Steel. This track here, I want it to sound kind of like that. And so that's why the finished product it kind of sounds something like that. So I think Cary Fukunaga might have had a really specific vision for a couple of times that the On Her Majesty's Secret Service music had to be played. And I think Hans Zimmer was just like, okay, I can do that, because he can do anything. And if you listen to the soundtrack all the way through, he replays Adele's Skyfall, the Skyfall theme, a number of times, and then they have playbacks to other bits, and it's kind of amazing, but it is craftsmanship rather than art, because what he has done is taken pieces from previous composers' movies and then put them together like a jigsaw puzzle, and then filled in the cracks with his own music. And he is an incredibly talented composer. And then there's the Billie Eilish theme that gets put in there and various things. So it's like a kind of like Frankenstein creation. And I don't think any other composer would have been able to pull it off the way that Hans Zimmer did. And I absolutely love it. And to me, I think it's something that's kind of left me torn, because I pledged my allegiance to David Arnold. I think he's fantastic at James Bond. He is a James Bond purist. And as I said, yeah, he's like the Yorkshire puddings and roast beef dinner. But Hans Zimmer did a fantastic, fantastic job with this. And I guess there's never going to be another James Bond movie like No Time to Die because of the ending. I don't think they would ever dare to try and pull something like that off again, at least not for another 25 movies. So I think maybe this time Hans Zimmer was the man for the job, but he was the man for that job that once in a lifetime movie experience. And so next time when we go back to James Bond formula pizza again, David Arnold is there as like that luxurious Yorkshire pudding topping. Anyway, I'm getting called, so I have to run off. But I would love to know what you think, whether you think David Arnold or Hans Zimmer would have been the best choice for No Time to Die. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will speak to you soon. Ciao!